Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. And in the pre-show, we were talking a little bit about other football leagues. So if you want to check that out, go to patreon.com/southboundsports. And it kind of brought me to our high tempo, which I brought this up, and I'm kind of reading off my tablet here on the side. So I'm a little bit crooked on the video, but they released the most watched telecasts for like 2022. And out of the top, I don't know who cropped this, but out of the top 18 they have listed here in the screenshot, 17 were football. The only thing that cracked that is the State of the Union that Biden gave on like whatever, March, like that delayed one. So you had the Super Bowl, the AFC, NFC championship, then like the divisional game from the AFC. Thanksgiving actually came in at number 5 last year. And then the wild card divisional playoffs. I'm surprised the Cowboys and Niners wild card was that high. They came in at number 6. But I think that's a big draw. And historically, that's been like a rivalry in the playoffs, right? With T.O. Was that a playoff game where he went and spiked a star or whatever? So there's some bad blood there. And then another Thanksgiving game came in at number 10 from CBS, the Bills-Lions. So, like, when you have top 20 sport and they talk about, like, the NBA trying to own, like, Christmas or whatever, they come nowhere close to what the NFL does on Thanksgiving. And that's where, just overall, sports are owning television. So, like, we hear about people, like, cutting cord or whatever. I'm most looking forward to, and I know this is probably going to annoy you, Matt, but I'm looking forward to more Big Ten football starting to creep up these lists because the networks are buying in to the Big Ten just like the NFL. You're going to have games on NBC, CBS, and Fox. You're not going to have to pay for cable. If you watch the national championship game, which we're going to talk about the game itself later in the show, but just from a TV broadcast, the worst rating of all time, at least like in modern times from the BCS forward. And that's partly because of it being a blowout. But before the blowout happened, it really wasn't much higher, right? It wouldn't have cracked this top list. It would have been one of the most watched events, though, because even non-NFL events, like I said, the State of the Union, but then you have Beijing College Football National Championship game last year. Then you have the semifinal game. The Michigan TCU Fiesta Bowl this year was like at 21. I want to say that's similar to what it was at the beginning of that game last night, which is kind of a slam for like the national championship game. And I don't want to say that Georgia's just not that big, but like TCU's not big either. And I think some people tuned in, and I want to say the ratings probably would have picked up if there was some buzz about the game, like TCU hanging around. They didn't even show up, so I don't think they got that extra buzz of like, hey, this is a good game, you should turn it on late, right? Because that's the one thing that annoys me. The timing of the game is awful. Like, that game is never going to have good ratings to start because it's starting at 4:30 on the West Coast, I believe, right? It's 7 here. They're 3 hours behind. They started at 7:30 or whatever. So it's like 4:30. Right when people are leaving work on the West Coast, they're starting the national championship game on a random Monday. There's no reason why the game should be on Monday. It should be on a Saturday, and it should be like a Saturday night. And hell, even have the NFL lead into it. Like, if they're worried about whatever, I'm hoping that maybe this comes around, because I guarantee it's ESPN trying to keep like their Monday Night Football thing going, which is why it's there. But I'm hoping like the Big Ten TV deal kind of starts this forward, where it's going to say like, hey, instead of having, what was that game on Saturday, Jags-Titans? Is that the Saturday night one, I think? So, like, you could have the Jags-Titans at 4:30, right? A big playoff matchup. Saturday's going to have decent, big ratings anyway. Like, what else is on? It's winter. And then you lead into the national championship game. But the national championship game has to be on regular TV going forward. And that's what I hope happens with playoff expansion. Because it has to kill the ESPN stranglehold. ESPN is not helping college football. It's not helping other sports. Them throwing a ton of money at it and then gatekeeping the games. Now you're just hearing secondhand from like people that didn't watch the game or whatever saying like, oh, Georgia TCU, that was a non-compete. Like, you don't even have to pay attention to college. You're not going to get casual fans that way. Meanwhile, the regular playoff games, what were they, semifinals? Those are both great games. Again, New Year's Eve, awful timing. I don't know why they just don't put those on New Year's, right? Is it the Rose Bowl? But even the Rose Bowl that has that time slot or whatever, when the Rose Bowl is a playoff game, they still don't have them on New Year's Eve. Or New Year's Day, I mean. So I don't get them trying to own that New Year's Eve if that's a Disney thing. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. Some other ones that made the top like 10 non-NFL ones were like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The Final Four between North Carolina and Duke actually beat the championship game between Kansas and North Carolina, but wasn't that Coach K's last game? So that's not too surprising. It was only by like a 0.4 more. And then World Cup. And this is just for the United States, but World Cup isn't even close to being more popular than football. And it's kind of like something we talked about, like with NFL having other leagues like in Europe and stuff now. American football could grow if given the opportunity around the world, like basketball's been trying to do, right?
I think it potentially could.
I don't see why not. I think people want to get into it. Like, if football is staying strong through everything, and you start to have it, like soccer, you have all these things, and it's kind of like the same. Why not have both, right? They don't have like a baseball. Some countries do, I guess. Rugby's kind of popular, but rugby and like some of the other sports, you really don't get downtime. I know people consider it a negative for like American football, but it is a good sport to have on while you're at the bar or like out and about, right? Because if there's a big play, you can kind of tune in, but if you're having a conversation, you miss like a play or two, you're not missing like a potential goal, and there's only like 2 goals a game, right? And even if you do miss the big play, they show 100 replays of it. It's not like soccer or something where if you make the goal, then immediately the ball's back in play, and they're not really showing like a bunch of highlights because there's no stoppage, right? And I get some people like that, but having like a casual sport, because baseball used to fill that void, right? You're not going to need to see every pitch. They'll show enough home run replays if it happens or whatever. But you can at least kind of follow along, and then when the game's on the line, like late, you can either tune in or just be like, I'm turning this off. Like, why is this game on? Doesn't really matter. So, what was the game on Sunday that happened? Was it the Cowboys blowout? Like, they didn't show... Well, there was one other meaningful game. It was the Dolphins and the Jets, right? The Dolphins had to beat the Jets. Actually, I must have hit you up first. Do you have anything you want to bring up in terms of that before I get into the NFL stuff?
No, go ahead.
Do you have anything for the high tempo? So, as I talk about the TV stuff, I was very annoyed that Steelers end up missing the playoffs, right? The NFL put all 3 games on at 1. So 3 things needed to happen. Patriots needed to lose. The Dolphins needed to lose, and the Steelers needed to win. One TV is showing the Patriots game, right? And they're losing. That's good. My other TV is showing the Carolina game. And so I'm watching that game, and I'm like, all right, like let's let's go ahead. Maybe it was that game I'm thinking of. I'm going to look at the actual score and see if they have the time frame on here. Did they have the 1 o'clock games? Maybe the Cowboys were later. Maybe that was the Seahawks-Rams game I was waiting on. Yeah, I think it was. So I'm waiting, and I'm like, come on. Like, let's get this Panthers game over with. This game matters 0%. They're 2 losing teams. It's a 10-7 game. Like, no one cares. Even on, like, the Patriots. Patriots are losing. And it's almost a blowout at this point. The Bills are running the clock out. You would think that the NFL would say, like, hey, switch to a different game. Because, like, a week ago it happened where I'm watching the game and it's a 2-score game and they're like, and randomly we're going to take you to this other game. And I was like, wait, my fantasy guy's playing in that game. Go back. So, like, I'm never on the winning end here. And all I wanted to know were, like, the Steelers were up, the Patriots I knew were going to lose, and the Jets and Dolphins were in a 6-6 tie, and they didn't cut to the game. And I thought, like, why? All they did was put the score up in the top left. Did you notice that? They had, like, the scores of the games that mattered. But I was like, they could do so much more by showing a little bit of the game. Because I thought, at the end of that Dolphins game, I text you, I didn't think that was a horse collar tackle. So the Jets needed, or the Dolphins were driving. I think they needed, like, 10 yards for first down or whatever. I don't know. I don't remember what down it was exactly. Cornerback comes up. It's like an out route for like 3 or 4 yards. He wouldn't have been close to the first down. He pulls him down. Did you see the tackle?
I saw the tackle, but I mean, whether he made that like, whether they called that or not, Pittsburgh needed that play. But if you're relying on the Jets to get yourself into the playoffs, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs.
Like, that's not the theme of this show, Matt. The theme of this show is how refs' bad calls affect like people's enjoyment of the games, right?
No, because there was nothing to enjoy with the national championship beatdown, and that's exactly what would happen to Pittsburgh again had the Jets beat the Dolphins.
You don't know. It would have
just been Yes, I do. The last 6 years they got in the playoffs. What'd they do? They lost. Same thing Michigan does on the New Year's Six Bowl. They lose. They make it. You get to do your promo and your video edit, and then you lose.
I think Pickett needed the experience, though. It's not like Ben Roethlisberger getting in, being old, and not getting it done, right? Getting Pickett a playoff win would build the momentum so much. Like, look how the Bengals rode. They're like, I think, did they go to the Super Bowl the first year? I can't remember. But like, they rode their playoff ride all the way to now being considered one of the top franchises, like in the AFC. The Ravens, on the other hand, regular season kings, I don't think Lamar Jackson still has a playoff win. And so having the chance to even get in the playoffs and try to get that first win, I think would have done wonders. Now, maybe they wouldn't have got it done, right? They would have been playing the Bills. You can't count them out. It's not like the Bills have been showing up every playoff game that they're in. So let's go ahead, try to make the playoffs. And all I'm saying is the Dolphins still could have won the game. It was tied. But it was a tackle where they called a horse collar. He didn't say horse collar whenever he called the penalty, though. He said, what did he say? Like roughing, unnecessary roughness or whatever that is. And the guy grabbed up underneath the nameplate. He didn't grab the name. He didn't grab the shoulder pad. And he tackled him. Like, what did they want him to do? Let go? And let the guy run for a first down? Because that play specifically gave them 15 yards up. I don't think they got another first down. I think they had to settle for a long field goal. If that penalty is not called, they have to punt the ball. The 15-yard penalty put them in field goal range for the game-winning field goal. And I'm not saying, like you saying, Steelers might, like they would have been counting on the Jets or whatever. It wouldn't have mattered. You would have had an overtime game that would have been meaningful. Because the Jets, like Robert, was it Saleh? Is this his first or second year coaching? What a choke job down the stretch. You blame it on the quarterback. Quarterbacks get injured. What did they lose, like 6 games in a row or something? The Dolphins were kind of on a similar streak. where they were even rumored of firing their coach, the Dolphins, which to me is kind of insane, right? What are you doing? Like, it makes no sense. Like, hey, the Dolphins were relevant. Our quarterback keeps having concussions. What do we need to do to make the playoffs next year? It's not like, hey, let's get better protection, or hey, maybe we should trade for another quarterback. It's no, let's fire the coach, right? It's like the most insane thing I've ever heard. But that's where I thought, hey, let's go ahead, get the Steelers that playoff spot. But you're saying, and you text me this, and I was going to make this a topic, but I ended up not for some reason. I just forgot. But you're saying that you were hoping that the Steelers would lose so they'd get better draft picks, but that's like a mid-round pick. Does that even matter?
Well, I didn't want them to lose because if you make the playoffs, I think there is something to be said about that. And like, if you make the playoffs, you stand a chance of getting a run at the right time. Like Pittsburgh has been one of those teams that's gotten lucky in the past, and I think they had the potential to do it. But when you're looking at recent history, they make the playoffs, and it's like, oh, great, Tomlin's never had a losing season as head coach, but they lose in the first round of the playoffs, so you end up with like a really shitty pick. I'd rather, if you're in this mode where you need to rebuild, which I don't know that they're in as desperate need as a lot of other franchises in terms of like needs and development stuff. But I can't wrap my brain around why the commentators and why everyone keeps saying Deontay Johnson is the best receiver that Pittsburgh has. Like, I know that they forced him into the money because they didn't have anybody else. He didn't score. He didn't have a receiving touchdown. Like, Mike Leach was famous for saying, the ball finds your playmakers, and you spread the ball around. You attempt to try to get the ball into the hands of as many different guys as possible, but the guys that really touch the ball a lot are the ones that are going to end up making the plays. Like, the ball will find them eventually. It's like Deontay Johnson. They throw him like he how many drops did he have? If I felt like every time they threw a pass to him, he dropped it, and then they throw two passes to Pickens, and he has a touchdown and a huge first down. Like, he catches everything. Like, why wouldn't you throw the ball to the guy that's going to make a play? That's the frustrating thing.
Do you think that they're keying on Pickens though and leaving Johnson open just because they know he sucks?
There's a possibility that they're doing that, but honestly, the coverage seems tight all the time on Pickens, and he just makes plays. So it's like, if I were a quarterback, I would throw it to the guy that's going to make plays as opposed to dropping the ball consistently.
That's true. That's where I don't know what they can do to improve. Do you think they bring in another wide receiver? I would think that they should bring in some veterans, right?
I think it would depend on what the market is. I definitely think they need to upgrade the receivers. I'll throw now that he was fired. How would you feel about firing Canada and bringing Cliff Kingsbury in?
Is Kingsbury going to be around though? I've never been high on Kingsbury. Going back to him riding Leach's coattails at Texas Tech. Never really standing up for Leach in that whole scenario. Like, that rubbed me the wrong way. And then him getting the job, them kind of getting lucky, like getting his quarterback, Kyler Murray. I knew that was never going to work out. And so, like, him getting fired is kind of a scapegoat move because they've also had, how much time did Hopkins miss? It feels like he's always been out. So, like, you're bringing guys in, everyone is like, remember when everyone applauded that trade? Like, oh, they killed it. They're going to be contenders. Like, they never really contended. And so bringing him in, I think, would be great to get in, like, some of those ideas or whatever. But, I mean, obviously, I honestly didn't mind Canada. But he's kind of bounced around, so maybe him trying to fit in his offense in the NFL just doesn't work. Maybe he's more of a college OC. So bring in Kingsbury, see if his offense works too. Like, I wouldn't mind that. I'm afraid that his style isn't really going to isn't going to fit the quarterback play, right?
I don't know. Like, I mean, as the year wore on, I felt like it got better, and I think consistency always is going to be the thing that's going to lead to longer term success.
I just think Kenny Pickett needs like a pro style, right? So like, why not bring in a guy with an offense that can actually like run the ball? I felt like that's what Arizona hasn't been able to do, right? Didn't they bring in like David Johnson for a bit? And then they're like bringing in all these other guys, and it just never worked out because like they're running like the zone read type air raid style where it's like,
well, they're running that component because they have that style. Like they had Kyler Murray,
but he handpicked him, didn't he?
I think he did. But if you're saying this is who our quarterback is, and I think Pickett he's mobile enough that it would match well with that shorter passing style of the air raid.
I honestly would like to see him bring in, like, I know a lot of people hate him, but like Greg Roman, and have him run like the old Alex Smith offense, like with the 49ers.
See, and I think that would hurt his development more than anything. Like I think taking, like, essentially what Tom Brady's doing now with Tampa. I mean, he's throwing the shorter underneath pass. Like he's not back there for an hour winding up and ripping it. He's getting the ball out of his hand quick, reading coverages. There's pre-snap shifts and motions. Like I think that's what's going to make today's NFL like that. That's what helps your quarterbacks get the best look on what the coverage is, get the matchups, and go with it.
Well, that was what Canada was supposed to be doing, right? Bringing in the pre shifts and stuff. Never really worked out.
And then they traded Claypool as well to the Bears. So I mean, they do have that extra pick in the first round,
and that was an awful pick for the Bears, right? Like that was a steal. He did nothing. You're talking about Johnson. I saw some Bears guy like going off on him, like Claypool trade being one of the worst trades of all time because he like brought zero stats to the team at all.
Yeah, but look at what he did with Pittsburgh. Like he did nothing for Pittsburgh either, other than cost them games and fumble.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that kind of annoyed me. Where like I was high on that pick. And then I think it's kind of like the locker room. So it's been annoying me with the Steelers for a while where it's like, hey, this is it. Everyone seems to be a diva in our wide receiver group. And I think Johnson is keeping that kind of alive, right? Where if they just cut him, bring in some vets that don't have that component. Like look at Juju. Everyone kept saying about like how he was going to be a baller this year with Kansas City. Like he only had like one good game, one great game, I guess I should say. I mean, I guess he's been all right. The Chiefs have been good, like whatever, but he spread his ball around. It's not like Juju's like the leading guy for them. And that's kind of like what they were trying to do. I'm trying to look and see. He's behind Kelsey. He has 3 touchdowns, Juju. Let's see. Hardman has 4. Kelsey has 12, and McKinnon, the running back, has 9. But it's like the Chiefs brought you in to, score touchdowns. Like you're supposed to be like the Tyreek Hill guy. I knew the Steelers like letting him go like wouldn't be a big issue, right? I think a lot of fantasy people would be upset. Like Mike Evans almost scored 4 touchdowns in that last Week 17 game for the Bucs, right? He actually did have 3, didn't he? He had the same amount of Juju all year. In one game. So that's hilarious to me. But whatever. I just think like I don't even know what big wide receiver vets are out there that are just gonna work around. But I've seen some vet or some free agent lists, and I think that there are going to be some pieces that they can bring in. It just really comes into what are they trying to do? Do they want to keep building? They ended up being close this year. And maybe that's why I was hoping, like, remember the Ben Roethlisberger year when it was like his first year and they continued like that hot streak at the end of the year? I heard people saying like, well, they should have won early in the year if they wanted the playoffs. But like, no, you need to get hot. Upset a Bills team in the first round of the playoffs would have been insane, right? Like that would have been the Steelers' move if they would have been able to sneak in. Now you're going to watch a Dolphins team that didn't even like sneak in. They ended up limping in and got ref help. The Bills are going to absolutely demolish them, right?
I would say yes.
I think, let me bring up the actual playoff bracket to make sure that that's who's playing. But let's be honest, the Bills got absolutely screwed. And I looked at the standings. Maybe they knew that the Chiefs were going to win, but I don't think division matters. So if the Bills would have finished that Bengals game and got the win, I don't know what the tiebreaker would have been against the Chiefs if they would have got that one seed or not. Right? Because like the conference, they both would have been, no, the Bills would have got it. They would have been 10-2. So the Bills would have been the number 1 seed. They never got to finish that game. It also screwed the Bengals out, right? So now they're saying that the Bills are going to get a non, or it's in a neutral site game, right?
Yes.
If they play the Chiefs, but they also don't get the bye. So now they have to go ahead and play the Dolphins. And so I'm trying to look and see when this game is. They played on Sunday at 1. It's at Buffalo. Dolphins limped in. I think that should be a pretty good Bills beatdown, right? But now you're slated behind the Chiefs. Now you have a possibility to play like the Bengals in the second round again. Maybe they would have lost to them. I don't know. But like now the Chiefs have a lineup between the Chargers and the Jaguars. The Jaguars also basically limped into the playoffs after ending the season hot, right? Like they didn't really blow the doors off the Titans in that game. That's the game I wanted both teams to lose. But Vrabel, that's another thing too. It's like everyone is like high on Vrabel. He's basically just like a light version of Jim Harbaugh, right? Except Jim Harbaugh would have found a way to get Derrick Henry like actually and have them move the ball. And he would have had like a quarterback. It wouldn't matter because like you've seen it with like Alex Smith and Kaepernick, like guys that no one else wanted. He was able to turn them into serviceable quarterbacks. He has Dobbs out there throwing 3-yard outs on like 3rd and 10, right? It's like, who's calling these plays? And it wasn't just the last time that they did that. He did it earlier in the game a couple of times too, where it's like, yeah, you're giving Dobbs a check down. But like, hey, buddy, how about you call a play where all 4 of your dudes are past the first down marker because it's the end of the game? Like, what are you doing? You're like, yeah, he hits the out route. Awesome. There's no way that guy's getting a first down because it wasn't like they were trying to do a misdirection. I just don't get it. Like, even the Lions, like, did you see their creativity where they did that one, like, quick hitch and then he pitched it to the running back on, like, was it 2nd or 3rd and long? Like, that's what Tennessee should have been doing. Things like that. They had no wrinkles. It was like, well, here we go. And that's why at least Harbaugh would put in wrinkles whenever he was running the ball. Remember the Alex Smith, like, naked boot? He ran, like, a 30-yard touchdown for the Saints. Like, beat Sean Payton. Now him and Sean Payton are competing for the Broncos job. So funny. Harbaugh should just bring that game up. Like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with Sean Payton. I remember when I ran that naked boot and beat him in the playoffs. Then the Broncos fans would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I remember that too. So, I don't know. I feel like the AFC is going to be a mess. Doing like their own like little thing isn't going to be much. But maybe they had a feeling that there's a good chance the Bengals play the Bills in the second round anyway, and that'll just make up for the regular season game that they lost. Like whoever wins, now we don't have a rematch, right? If they do get a rematch, there's going to be hype around Hamlin. Now that he's like been discharged from the hospital. Which I don't know why they didn't say that. The ESPN thing said that Hamlin was released. I got an alert. And I was like, did the Bills cut him? Like literally right before the playoffs. Not like, not like released from the hospital, because I don't think anyone ever says that, right? Don't they just say discharged?
Yeah.
It's not like a prison release, man. I hear the word release, I think he got cut. So I'm like, damn, they're heartless over there in Buffalo getting ready for the playoffs. But it was supposed to be a good thing. I'm like, come on, ESPN. Don't do that to me. What do you think of the AFC side? We'll start with the opening week games. Bills, Dolphins, who do you have?
Oh, Dolphins are losing that one.
Yeah, they've limped in. That's going to be bad. I don't even know if Tua's back. I don't even know how Tua can come back.
The only way that I think they can be competitive is if they get to play again.
But how can he come back? Aren't you like supposed to have, like, if you have so many concussions in a row, you're supposed to just retire, right? This happened to my man Steve Young. As a kid, I was like heartbroken, right? I was like, no, Steve, come back. It was like losing two Steves as a kid. Steve from Blue's Clues and Steve Young around the same time, right? I brought that up because I saw an ad. And so, like, Steve from Blue's Clues, they brought him back for their movie. And I was like, man, I didn't even know that guy was still acting or whatever. But that's what I think, like, when I see Tua. I'm like, he's crushing some kid right now. But, come on. I just don't think they can rush him back for a playoff game. And if he gets another concussion, then what happens? Like, he could die? Like, they don't want that.
Well, but I think that, like, that's always a threat. But I think if he has another one this season, I think maybe that's enough that he has to retire.
Yeah, it's nothing against him. It's like
4 concussions in 1 year.
Yeah, something's not right. Like, normally you don't get that many, right? So, and maybe they are like smaller ones. Most players do get more. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason they need to have.
I would say his are bigger because there's times that maybe a player takes a big hit and you're like, well, maybe they're concussed. Like, it's visible. You're watching his head slam. Like, oh yeah, he's definitely concussed there.
I just don't understand why college programs, like, didn't Michigan and like some of the other programs have sensors in the helmet to see, like, they were measuring how big the hits were. Like, why isn't the NFL implementing that? It kind of like died. Like, that was like 4 years ago, I feel like, before COVID. And then it's like, yeah, we gave up on that. But it's like, what are you doing?
No one's worried about that right now. There's a pandemic.
Yeah, now Tua is getting hit all the time. Like, if they had the thing to say, like, look, we did everything we could. His hit only registered like a whatever. Like, what do they measure that in? Not decibels or something. It'd be like a hertz. Like, what's the Richter scale?
Yeah,
like,
that really hurts.
That was a Richter scale, like a 3. So I don't know, but yeah, they're done. What do you got for the Ravens Bengals?
The fighting Lamars are going to lose.
I think so too. I think the Bengals are going to be the team on top. The next one, Chargers and Jags.
I'm going to go with the upset Jags.
Jags are the favorite. I guess they're not the favorite. They're just the higher seed. I don't know who the favorites are. You'd think they'd have that here. I honestly just don't know what to think of the Chargers, right? But Eckler, my man, got me a fantasy championship. I have to go for him. I hope he wins the Super Bowl now to return the favor. Do you think I should just start tweeting at him, asking him what's up? Ask him if he wants to be best friends. Say, should I waste my keeper on you? How you feeling next year? I just need to know. I need to know the deets. If you win the Super Bowl, I'm going to be more concerned, man. If you're out early and you're well rested for next year, then I won't be as concerned. We'll see what happens. But I think the Chargers advance. And then they set up a familiar game with the Chiefs, which I think will be closer than what people expect. And I would like to see the Chargers upset them, but we'll get there next week. Let's go to the NFC side. Seahawks at 49ers. Another game where Pete Carroll is very familiar with them. 49ers have a rookie QB and a never hurt Christian McCaffrey for some reason. Right? So,
well, because he's never hurt now, I think the Niners are going to win.
I'm going upset. Pete Carroll, Seahawks, Geno. It's going to be a game. And everyone's counting the Seahawks out. They backed in. The Packers missed the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, I brought up all the Lions, played balls out to win that game. That was the game where they showed me the Cowboys. They wouldn't show me the Seahawks ending. I didn't know if they were going to win that game. They snuck into the playoffs. Now they're going to come in fired up because they got in. They really screwed away. I would have liked to see the Lions play the Niners. Right? If my Packers couldn't get it done, I would have liked to see the Lions have that opportunity because they've been playing hot too. And who knows, like they could have upset the 49ers, but I think the Seahawks are going to get that job. I think that one was always a threat where you have a rookie quarterback. Now you have some tape on him. Now it really matters. And they're going to key in on the run and make him beat them. And I just don't think he's going to be able to do it. What do you got for the Giants-Vikings?
I really want the Vikings, but I don't. At some point, they have to run out of luck.
This is a Joker's Bowl to me, or a Joker's game. Neither of these teams are any good. I don't know how they were able to get in the playoffs. Like, the Giants shouldn't be here. The Vikings have an inflated record. Is it because they started early? They haven't been playing well. Like, I would take them if they were playing either the Lions or the Packers right now. They just lost to the Packers. They would lose to the Lions, too. Like, I just don't know who's going to squeak by. I think it's going to be the Vikings just on account of that. The Giants aren't good either. I don't know what to think of this game. So I'm going Vikings. Next game, Cowboys-Bucks.
Oh, that's a no-win game.
That's a winner. That's my man Tom Brady, Matt. I got him. Taking home to the Cowboys. Cowboys fans will be heartbroken again. They'll say, like, this is a rip-off game. There's no way we should have been whatever seed. Cowboys have been playing bad. They had a chance to like get in and be the 1 seed, right? And then it's like you're losing to the Commanders. The Commanders didn't even show up when they had a chance to be in the playoffs. Cowboys, what are you doing? All you had to do was compete in that game. Maybe they knew that they lost a spot before. I don't remember how the timing went. But they put that game on Monday night on the old ABC, which is another one. It's kind of like, why is that on a Monday night? Why isn't it Sunday? Or is there a Sunday night game? There's a Sunday night game. So do we have a Saturday night? Yeah, so I guess it works out. We'll see. But I have my man Tom Brady. I got him winning. Who do you have? Did you pick yours?
No, I didn't want to pick that game.
Why? You don't like the Cowboys?
I could see the Cowboys potentially making it competitive.
Matt, I'm telling you, this is set up perfectly for Tom Brady. The Cowboys coming in, they're hot and cold. They upset them. Then, oh my gosh, they get to play either the Vikings or the Giants most likely, right? Or, I think if it slates out, yeah, I think it would be either of those. Maybe they would play the 49ers, but or no, they'd play don't they play the Eagles maybe? No, isn't it by losers, by the thing? So they might have to play the 49ers. I don't know about the second round because I think they reseed them, don't they?
Maybe.
Now I'm getting confused, but there is a chance where I'm thinking the Seahawks win, the Vikings or Giants win or whatever. That's who plays Tampa Bay. Because I'm thinking the Eagles would get the Seahawks. That'd be the lowest seed. But maybe I'm wrong. But that's my thought process. So the Tampa Bay has a chance to play like the Giants or the Vikings before they play the Eagles. And then that would be the NFC Championship game. Eagles, Bucks. Tom Brady coming out. As long as he doesn't dead arm it like Aaron Rodgers did, they could be in the Super Bowl again. You've heard it here first, Matt. You've heard it here. And people are going to say, like, how does he keep doing it? He can't keep getting away with it, Matt. The only thing that is different this year is Gronk hasn't come back, right? Or did I miss that? I think I would have got that notification.
Well, he's no longer with his family, so he doesn't have anything else better to do but grind film.
He's like, hey, I'm coming out, baby. Me and Gronk, we're back. Tom Brady's he's ready. He got that divorce stuff, like you said, out of the way. Who cares? He got nothing else but focus on beating the Cowboys. And if Mike Evans and him are back on the same page, look for some fireworks. And that opens everything up. Earlier in the year, he was dropping deep balls. Just catch him. Mike, catch him. What are you doing? That's the one thing with going back to the Aaron Rodgers. I think he's done. I don't know if you watched the Packers game, but twice he had a guy open 25, 30 yards downfield on the sideline. Instead of throwing a rope to him, he threw an ice cream truck ball all the way up in the clouds. It's floating down, and he let the safety intercept it twice. One of them got called back because of the hands to the face. And I was like, you could probably just wipe that off because that was such a bad throw. What are you doing? The guy's open. There's no one around him. Hit him early. What are you doing? Did you not see him? Is your arm you're got to lob this one up? It reminded me of a dad teaching his son to play outfield, Matt. He's I'm going to throw the ball up really high, and you're going to learn how to get under it. That's what it reminded me of. The dad wasn't confident in his ability to throw the ball up and hit the ball high in the air, so he's just throwing it out there. Aaron Rodgers just throwing it up, letting the safety just come under it. And the safety, I think he had 3 or 4 interceptions on him in the entire year like that. So, what are you doing? That's my last thing here. After the playoffs, what moves are even teams coming in? Is there a team for you that stands out they have to win this year? Bills?
I think the Bills are there. I think the Bengals are there.
Eagles? Is Hurts back? Oh, I guess he has another week off, so he should be back, right?
So that was the thing with if Hurts is out, I think they have almost an excuse.
If Hurts is out, baby, Tom Brady will be the best quarterback left. Seriously, look at that. If Hurts doesn't play, Matt, you have Tom Brady, Kirk Cousins, was it Purdy, Gino? What's the guy from the Giants now? Daniel, and then Dak, right? That's it. That's a whole bunch of nobodies. And Tom Brady. Other than Jalen Hurts is the only one that, if you're going to line those guys up and you're going to say, hey, who do you want a quarterback against? He'd be the only one I'd kind of be worried about. Maybe him and Dak, right? And Tampa Bay gets him first. You don't know how he's going to show up. Cowboys got him no weapons. Weren't they rumored to bring other guys back? Like Dez? And they didn't bring anybody back.
Maybe OBJ. He's waiting for the playoffs to sign.
I thought he was hurt, wasn't he?
Well, he was, but then people were shopping him around. He's like, I have the team I want to play for, but at this point, he won the Super Bowls. He's like, regular season just doesn't do it for me now.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because you have Jim Harbaugh once again shopping around for an NFL job. And I know you joked about Michigan not winning a New Year's Six Bowl since whatever. It's basically been Harbaugh. And I've said it before. I feel like every year I go through this where I don't know if he's all in on getting Michigan ready for the playoffs / bowl games. I don't think it was as noticeable before because you had people opting out. Jabril Peppers, he's not playing. So it's an easy excuse. We had a chance to come back. Jake Buck got hurt and Jabril was already out. So and the Peppers one kind of always struck me as odd because it was right when opt-outs kind of started and he kind of just did a McCaffrey, right? He just kind of tweaked his hamstring. And notice how with the NFL, he hasn't really been hurt ever again. He never really missed time at Michigan. He literally just missed a bowl game on a tweaked hammy during warmups, which almost made it seem like Harbaugh kind of told him yo, don't play in this game. Right? Maybe that's a conspiracy.
It really shocked me though that he didn't play because nobody even mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't even know because it was such a meaningless bowl game, right? If it's not the playoffs, the bowl games really don't matter at all. Which is why it's funny to me that they're bringing up teams that are hey, they won a New Year's Six. Who'd they beat? Oh, they beat Arkansas State. right? Like the Cotton Bowl. It's like if USC would have beat Tulane this year, like they might have already been on the list for beating Penn State or something. But it's like, does that really matter? Like Michigan's playing in the playoffs. Like there's a big difference. That's why I kind of want the playoffs to expand. But to me, whatever Harbaugh's doing every year, it doesn't make sense. Like I've said on the show, he really wanted the Jets job. It seemed like he was ready to go to the Jets job, and they hire Soleil, right? It seems like he's ready to go to the Vikings last year. He just shows up. He thinks he gets the job, and they don't hire him. This year, it's like he sat on a 2-hour Broncos interview Zoom yesterday. Did you know that?
No.
I think it ended up yesterday. So it's really between him and Sean Payton, which is why I joked about, like, do you think on a 2-hour Zoom, Harbaugh just, like, accidentally switches, like, to share his desktop, and it's, like, a highlight of him beating Sean Payton, like, in the playoffs? Like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to share that. I had some old film I was, like, breaking down. And they'd be like, I should look that game up. You're beating Sean Payton there? What year was that? So when you're in the NFL, it's like, yeah, I kind of got away from it. But it almost seems like, because I almost wonder too, like the NFL guys have to know when he's coming in that, like, previously, and I think he's been more open about it just because he's been winning now. Because, like, in the past, he's losing to Urban Meyer every year. So, like, it's hard to say, like, hey, the Jets are going to make a slam dunk hire of Jim Harbaugh when, and I'm going to bring this up, his brother is also choking in the postseason every year. Like, how many years has Lamar been there? I've already said it. Lamar Jackson has no playoff wins, which means John Harbaugh hasn't had a playoff win. Right? He hasn't had a playoff win since Harbaugh's been with, like, Michigan. So you have the two brothers who don't have a postseason win since, like, 2015 or whenever. That's when Michigan beat Florida, I think, in the annual Florida Bowl. And then they beat them the next year, but it wasn't a bowl game, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm, like, wondering, like, is there a disconnect? Is it like, hey, I'm going to turtle up for both Harbaughs? Because I've seen John do the same thing that Jim does. And I've seen Michigan people say, like, well, if Jim leaves, we should go after John. I'm like, yeah, you're going to get the same thing, but is the playoffs going to still be the same? Because he can't win in the NFL playoffs either. And I think the other NFL owners see that, and they're saying, like, I don't want a good regular season. Like, I don't want a solid regular season. I want to know if you're going to get me that championship. And for whatever reason, maybe it is him not being prepared. Like last year, it leaked out that, like, he was interviewing before the Michigan's playoff game. Michigan came out really unprepared. This year, Michigan looked all out of sorts again. Got a couple of bad calls that swung the game, and they never were able to recover, right?
But I would say, like, this year, he seemed more prepared, but it just, like, you can't turn the ball over a gazillion times and against anyone and expect to be in the competitive game.
I don't know if they were more prepared. I feel like they were more confident. It was almost like he was like, yeah, the Vikings really embarrassed me last year. I'm going to show them because my team is much better this year. Like, they only had one close game all year. The Illinois game. And that was because Blake Corum gets hurt. If Blake Corum doesn't get hurt, Michigan has no close games this year going into the playoffs. So I think he was kind of overconfident, but you're playing in the playoffs without your best player, Corum, who announced he's coming back. And Donovan Edwards still has a broken hand, so he can't catch the ball, which is what he brings to the offense, right? Your second running back is more of like the third down change of pace. I think that's why Michigan was so awesome this year. You had a Heisman running back, and then your third down back could have been a starting wide receiver on almost every team in the country. So having him come out of the backfield and just also score long touchdowns against, like, Penn State, like when you play Penn State and you have both running backs having like 60+ yard runs, that's a luxury that only, like, Georgia has, right? So, like, only a couple teams have that luxury. I think Harbaugh just kind of got overconfident, or maybe he overlooked, like, the Blake Corum injury, how much that shifted the offense, and it didn't seem like they adjusted to that new reality. Maybe because Ohio State was selling out to stop the run so much that he didn't have to worry about it because like once Donovan broke a couple runs, like, but the very first play of TCU, if he had a little bit more speed, they would have had a touchdown on the very first play running the ball. So maybe he had that overconfidence. I don't know. I just wonder, like, is he really all in? Because he said last year that was going to be it. He said, I'm not messing around. I'm not doing this every year. He was really embarrassed because, like I said, he went to the Vikings and he told staff and everyone that he was gone. And then imagine having to come back to Michigan after that and then try to negotiate a raise, which they really didn't give him. He's still not the highest paid coach, even though he's like one of the winningest coaches in the Big Ten right now. It's really only him and Ryan Day, and then in third would be James Franklin, right? So I don't know. That's my concern with like some of these teams with like quarterbacks moving around. Like, would Harbaugh and Aaron Rodgers meet up somewhere randomly and say, like, look, we kind of need a Super Bowl together, buddy. So, like, don't skip training camp this year. Or, like, does he try to handpick, like with the Broncos, with Russell Wilson? Does he think he can just fix him? And that's the spot for him. But the Broncos have, like, no picks, right? He really seemed like he wanted Carolina, and Carolina just kind of ignored him. And did you see they were like, yeah, Harbaugh keeps calling us, but we're not really interested in his style of play. At least, I don't know if you've seen that, but that's kind of what the news down here was saying. Like, yeah, there's rumors about Harbaugh calling, but it's him. He's like literally calling us. And we are going to, it seems like they're going to hire the interim, right? Is it Wilkes? So having Harbaugh call them isn't going to be like a game changer. Because like really, if you called and you said like, what's your record in big games in Michigan? Because that's basically what the NFL is. It's the big games every year. Ask Urban Meyer. Or every week, right? Harbaugh doesn't have a good record. He has 2 wins, Matt. The last 2 years against Ohio State. Maybe you can count the Penn State wins, but like, do you really? It's like a noon on ABC and they're blowing out Penn State again. I feel like he blows Penn State out every time they're at home. When it's at Happy Valley, it's hit or miss, right? They could win, but it's never a blowout. They never went into Happy Valley and blew out Penn State, I don't think. I think the wins have been like by like a touchdown or something. So, like what are you interviewing and saying like this is my thing? The playoff win this year, they could have dismantled TCU just like Georgia did, and then who knows? Maybe Ohio State then comes out a little bit more pumped up because they want to play Michigan again, and they make the field goal. Like Ohio State was so unlucky. If they make that field goal, they're national champs, Matt. They were going to boat race TCU. TCU played the best game of their lives against Michigan and got 2 pick sixes and a touchdown wiped off the board to win that game. I was telling people all week, they're like, do you think TCU has a chance? I said, they have 0 chance. They have 0 chance. They got all the breaks against Michigan. That only happens once. That's not happening against Georgia. Georgia is a better version of Michigan. And everyone was saying, like, nah, you're wrong. It'll be like a shootout. No, it wasn't. That's exactly how I expected the game to go. I'm surprised TCU scored a touchdown. I'm not even joking. Because all year Michigan hyped up about, like, after the Ohio State game was how they're good with the bend but don't break. They go against TCU, they immediately throw that out the window, and they're doing jailbreak blitzes. And it's like, did Harbaugh put this in? Like, all you have to do is do a bend but don't break against TCU. They don't have the athletes to beat you. Georgia proved it. It was almost like Kirby Smart said, well, Michigan, we're going to do what you guys looked like you were trying to do, and we're just actually going to do it. And we're going to win really bad. And I think that has to rub Harbaugh the wrong way. And if I was interviewing him, I would say, like, you really struggle with TCU. Georgia really didn't. Like, what's going to, you coming here, how are you going to beat Tom Brady next year? Like, if you're Carolina, or like if you're the Broncos, how do you expect to beat Patrick Mahomes next year? Because you haven't done it at Michigan, right? And he's only hurting himself, where every year he does the NFL dance. Recruiting's been falling every year. I sent you like their little propaganda thing that they sent out, where, what did it say? I don't have it up in front of me, but it was something like Michigan has won championships after their recruiting has dropped off because now they've ignored the ratings. But you know they're not ignoring the rankings, Matt. Otherwise, they wouldn't be finalists for these top 100 guys, right? It's not like they just they started ignoring him. It's because the recruits have flat out said that they get negative recruited against Harbaugh because every coach tells them he's going to jump to the NFL whenever he gets the opportunity. So if you're a kid and you're getting recruited by Harbaugh and every other coach says like, hey, he's talking to the NFL, and then you turn on the ESPN and they're saying like, yeah, Harbaugh's been calling Carolina Panthers every day and no one's picking up. Why would you sign with them? Right? Like, that's what I don't understand. So like every year Harbaugh does this, he's hurting himself even more to the point where the NFL is not going to want him at all. Because every year he gets further and further from a bowl win. He gets further and further from like a big time game win. Like, yeah, the Ohio State games are great, right? Awesome. But every year he also has a game where his team doesn't show up. And in the NFL, all it takes is 1 week of your team not showing up and you're done. Just like the game against TCU. Michigan had one really bad game. That was like the only big game where they were kind of unprepared and had piss poor coaching all year. And it was the only game that mattered. Like, you might as well have just turtled the Purdue Big Ten championship game at that point and saved everything for like whatever. Like, I think that Harbaugh thinks, hey, we won the Big Ten, we beat Ohio State. Now I can kind of like get ready for the NFL. And hopefully our guys are kind of just going to win in the playoffs because they've been winning all year and it hasn't happened. So like almost a lot of people are coming back. Blake Corum's coming back. If Harbaugh comes back to Michigan, I think he has to win the national championship. Otherwise, he's never going to get an NFL job, right? If he doesn't get one this year, I don't see another option for him. Like, it's almost national championship or you're never going to get an NFL job again. I keep hearing people say, like, that are like Colin Cowherd and like Joel Klatt and people saying like they're hearing that he's going to end up back at Michigan next year. And honestly, it doesn't feel like it's going to be by choice. It's because the NFL is telling him no again. And I don't see anything that he's doing that would change their mind, right?
Yeah.
I think it rubbed them wrong that he couldn't beat Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer goes to the Jaguars and he sucks, right? Well, Harbaugh, you couldn't even beat Urban. Urban sucked here. Like, maybe the game has passed you by. We see your offense. Why didn't you run more of like a passing offense? Like, you're running the ball 70% of the time or 65% of the time or more. Like, yeah, you got great running backs, but whenever you're matched up against a team that has equal talent to you, it only happens like, I mean, yeah, he's beaten Ohio State twice, but he's what, 2-5 now? Like, I honestly think the NFL is not going to call until he's either 5-5 against Ohio State or he wins a national championship. I said it last year. If he wins a national championship, he would instantly get a call for an NFL job. Now it's kind of like, we're interested in you, but we want to interview you. And I guarantee they're bringing it up. Like, what are you doing differently? How are you losing to TCU again? They just had the worst, and I'll change the thing here. They had the worst blowout in a national championship game of all time. I don't see how that game makes an owner confident on Jim Harbaugh. Do you?
I don't know.
How could you, if you were saying like, hey, Matt, your team just like, you're hiring a coach that lost to a team that just lost by 60 points in the thing. Like, if the Steelers said like, hey, we're hiring Jim Harbaugh, I think there would be a riot. Like, if you fired Mike Tomlin and you brought in Jim Harbaugh, where would the hype be? Like, he's coaching like the Ohio State game is a Super Bowl, which it has been. You beat Ohio State, you win the Big Ten. Awesome. But like I said, the NFL is an Ohio State game every week. There are no Illinois where you can have a bad game and still win. There are no like Maryland's or whatever. It's going to be like even like the TCU game, a team that you have more talent than. All you have to do, limit mistakes. Like, why are you panicking? I just didn't get it. Like, why are you panicking? Do the same thing like you said against Ohio State. Make them kick field goals to beat you. Instead, they're like, nope, we got to blitz everybody and let the guy break one tackle and run for a touchdown. And it's almost like maybe they thought that our talent is so much better that we can kind of like goof around with this, but it didn't work out. And I really don't see a team that's going to take that gamble for the same reasons I've said. Like, if the Packers were like, hey, we're hiring Jim Harbaugh, I would say, oh, good God. Like, how's that going to be different than Aaron Rodgers losing in the playoffs every year? Right? I haven't seen anything. Like, I'm not even saying like he very easily could have won this first Super Bowl with the 49ers. They were doing like things that were innovative. You've seen him do innovative calls. I've seen it against like Purdue. But like you're doing these awesome calls against Purdue and against Ohio State, but the rest of the year you're not. You're just kind of like bullying everyone. And like I said, it's a different thing. Would I be excited if he came back to Michigan next year? Yeah. Would I think that Michigan's going to win the Big Ten? Yeah. Almost like they have a ton of players returning. Ohio State's breaking in a new quarterback. Georgia's breaking in a new quarterback. Alabama's breaking in a new quarterback. I told Matt before the show, there's only like 3 teams. I think it's Michigan with JJ, and he played bad in the playoffs, but like, I mean, he's been good other than that. You have Caleb Williams at USC, Jordan Travis at Florida State, and now was it Cam Rising coming back at Utah? I think there's like 4 quarterbacks now that are coming back that I think could have their teams in the top 10 coming into the year. Or is Penix coming back at Washington? Maybe there's 5.
Yeah, I want to say he's coming back.
Because they ended up the season in the top 10, right? I think they did. But Tennessee has a new quarterback. Like I said, all the other teams do. Penn State's going to have a new quarterback. Yeah, Penix is returning for 1 more year. So you have like 5 teams that are going to have a ton of talent with new quarterbacks. You also have 5 teams coming back with talent with quarterbacks that have experience. Out of the teams with quarterbacks coming back, Michigan's the most talented. Right? I would say probably Florida State's second? I guess maybe USC would be second. It depends on who Lincoln Riley can steal, right? If he brings in Marvin Harrison Jr., then maybe they're back on. Because like that's the thing. A lot of people are thinking that he's going to flip a couple of transfers out of nowhere. And maybe it happens at USC. But I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I guess you could say Clemson has a quarterback coming back, but not with experience, right? Not like the other ones. So, I don't know. Like, is Penn State with a new QB or Ohio State with a new QB going to be able to come in and beat Michigan? Ohio State has to play them in Michigan next year. With the boys, they're back together. The band's back together. And if Harbaugh comes back, the players kind of seem like they don't care. Blake Corum said he didn't even ask Harbaugh if he was coming back before he made his decision, right? That's an NIL move, though. Did you see Michigan had their 1 more year NIL thing come up? They have a separate NIL just to get people to come back. I think it was like Blake Corum and the 3 other dudes. Zach Zinter, I think, was one. I can't remember who the other ones were. But they wanted 4 dudes that they thought were key pieces to come back for a national championship team. And it looks like the NIL probably got it done, right? In the past, Michigan would have lost those guys. So I think even if Harbaugh leaves, you probably have 100 coaches lined up to play or to coach one of the top 3 teams in the country, right?
Yeah.
In terms of returning talent, they're probably behind, like, what, Georgia? I would probably have Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Bama or Ohio State 3, maybe USC 5. Depending on how you feel about Penn State, they could be up there, maybe Florida State for my top, like, 6 or 7 teams, you know? But if Harbaugh leaves, like, I think some other coach would be licking their chops to be like, holy shit. They were winning the game without even passing the ball last year. 13 of them. Like, didn't even lose until the playoffs running the ball. So why would you not want to coach that? Right? They would. I mean, could you imagine though being the coach that gives them a disaster of a season? Harbaugh leaves and some new guy comes in thinking he has it nice and easy, and they go 6-6 or something. It's like a disaster. JJ gets hurt like the first game or something. That would be insane. But I don't know. That's my thoughts. Like the Georgia TCU thing. I don't know. Michigan should have probably been in that game. I don't understand how Michigan always gets like these weird calls against them. I don't think the SEC refs should be able to control the game. Maybe there's a conspiracy there. The SEC knows TCU is a little bit better of a matchup for Georgia, so they kind of poke in that direction. I still don't know how they called in without a clear view and took the touchdown off the board. That was the difference in the game. If they don't take that touchdown away, Michigan wins, even with the 2 pick sixes. And then they're able to refocus. Everyone said, well, Georgia refocused. They would have killed Michigan. You don't think Michigan would have refocused after a tight win? TCU came in hyped up. They thought, we're better than everyone thinks. We don't need to they probably weren't focused at all this week, right? Beating Michigan was their Super Bowl. And then they found out, they fucked around and found out, Matt. They're like, oh shit. Did you see? They looked like deer in headlights. I watched their quarterback float that one ball into the ground, and I thought, this is embarrassing. They're not even prepared. It was worse than what Michigan did last year against Georgia, right? Michigan was at least kind of moving the ball and slowing them down a bit. They weren't even slowing Georgia down at all. TCU. The final score of the Michigan game was the second quarter score of that TCU Georgia game. And that was without JJ at quarterback. That was with them just having Cade in the pocket just standing there, and Georgia just going all out and rushing everybody on him every play. TCU couldn't even do anything. I don't get it. But I don't know what the college football is going to do. I think they need to expand the playoffs. I definitely think they need to get rid of buys. Did you hear that's being talked about now? I think part of it, and this might have been in the pre-show, so if you want to hear the full thing, you can always go to see the live stream on patreon.com/southboundsports. But the ESPN owns the rights to the playoffs. That's why the ratings are bad, because it's only on cable. They don't broadcast it on ABC for some reason, right? So they wouldn't dare do that to the NFL. So I have a feeling that when the negotiations are back up, that ESPN's going to have to do some concessions and say yo, it's going to be here. I also think they're going to get pressure from the other networks that own the Big Ten, which is clearly one of the commentators before the national championship game. I had it on at around 4. I forget who it was, but they were complaining that the Big Ten's throwing all this money and catching up to the SEC. And it's well, yeah, the SEC's been having the ESPN hype train for 10 years. The Big Ten's going to start throwing even more money around than what the SEC can keep up with. So if that's the game you want to play, I did think it was a little weird too that you had a national championship game between Georgia and TCU right in the heart of Big Ten country, right? In LA. Who's going to there for that game? There's no tailgating. They should know better. That game, I want to see more games on college campuses too. Because that's another beef Michigan had, was that the surface of the Arizona thing was new and they kept slipping or whatever. And it happens every time they play in a bowl game. Which, go after Nike, Say yo, what the hell? How come our things that are always messed up? Someone did a thing that the only team that plays on artificial turf to win a national championship was Ohio State back in 2014. I think ever or something they said. So where's the home field advantage? Yeah, it's nicer to have the turf. Play the bowl game at home. I still think what's the reward for Michigan? TCU didn't win their conference, didn't win anything, really. And I thought it was a joke that the pollsters put them at number 2. They had 2 losses. They had the same amount of wins as Michigan at 13. They got their asses kicked so bad. And I think most people watching the game thought that Michigan either got screwed by the refs or choked. I could easily see Michigan getting number 2 votes. And so I went back and looked, And Ohio State fell in like when they lost to Florida the one year from number 2 all the way to number 5. You're having a 2-game playoff. It's not like TCU ran a gauntlet of 4 games in a row before they lost to Georgia, right? There's nothing to put them at number 2. I don't even think people should have put them ahead of Ohio State. It should have been Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, TCU, and then whatever other teams you want. I think it's a joke that Bama was voted ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee beat them. Like, there's no rating where you can say, and did I already talk about this? Tennessee, like, you could say, like, Tennessee's guy was hurt, but it's the final pool. No one cares about the injury. He's not going to play another game. They already beat Alabama. There's no way you can put them ahead of them. Like, that's why, some people had 8 people had Michigan behind Ohio State. Michigan killed Ohio State. Ohio State had more losses and 2 less wins. Like, there's no reason Ohio State could have been number 2. Just because they played Georgia close, then put Michigan number 2 and Ohio State number 3. Michigan had 1 bad game. They have a 6-point loss. TCU had 2 losses, and one of them was by 60 points or whatever the hell that game was. I zoned out, so I don't know how many more their backup scored. Right? I know the polls don't really mean shit, so... but that's another thing that annoyed me. So I'm wondering, going forward, get the expanded playoffs, put it on regular networks, get rid of the buys. I think I'd mentioned, and I cut all around, but they said that 16-team playoff is on the table. They realize now that having the buys is a bad idea because... And I think they're talking about maybe having more conferences in. I think it's in response to the thing we talked about, was it last week, where the NCAA said that they would like to see like 25% of the teams participate in the postseason in terms of like fairness or whatever. Because like if there's a lawsuit from all these NIL people or whatever from the NCAA, it's easier for them to keep their funding from like non-taxes or whatever by saying like, no, this is a scholarship merit thing. College football is a beauty pageant. There's no merit to it at all. TCU didn't even win their conference. They won nothing, like I said. They shouldn't even have been in the playoffs. But you can't put Bama there, right? They had 2 losses, and they lost to Tennessee. So, like, how could you put them ahead of Tennessee and say, like, yep, sorry, Tennessee. Beauty pageant stuff, you know? So the only way that's going to be fair is if they have the expanded playoff, put it at the team, and I honestly think it's going to help a lot of the teams. Like, how do you know Georgia just wasn't rusty against Ohio State? How do you know Michigan just wasn't rusty? How many teams are taking like an entire month off and then having to play in a playoff game and dudes just aren't like there physically again, right? I think TCU did say like Michigan was tired at the end of the game. Yeah, no shit. They ran like 100 something plays. That game was like ridiculous in terms of pace. They did it to themselves. I don't know if it's about being out of shape, but yeah, they also didn't play in a month. So maybe it's a little bit of both. I think the games will be a lot closer. I'm not saying just this year for Michigan TCU. I'm saying why a lot of playoff games have been blowouts. It's because some teams, it's just hard to not play for a month. It just is. So I think having more rounds in the playoffs are going to make for a more balanced thing. I don't think you're going to see as many blowouts. That's my prediction. What do you think? You have anything else for college football?
No.
I think I got all my points out. Next week we'll just be kind of doing an NFL show. Unless Harbaugh makes his decision, then I'll do a Jim Harbaugh epitaph thing. Let's see. You got anything for the final bell? Because I think I'm done for myself.
Yeah. I think we pretty much got everything out there.
All right.
Although there is one last thing, because I'm sure you have been keeping up with your Florida State news. So they've basically turned South Carolina into their farm team. They've just raiding players off of there. That is getting to a point where the message boards for South Carolina are like, just take all our guys. Just make sure you beat Clemson next year.
Well, I'll tell you. Apparently, Shane Beamer is very interested in the Michigan job as one of the coaches. As like a random, I don't know how high he would be on the list, But like, could you imagine just being like, yeah, I'm really interested? It was kind of like when Matt Rule, because like Matt Rule has to be kicking himself, right? Because he really wanted the Michigan job last year. I don't know if he would have been the biggest name for it, but like he takes the Nebraska job, and then Harbaugh finally jumps to the NFL, and then Michigan hires like Shane Beamer. Like, wouldn't that be the most ridiculous twist of fate? And then Nebraska comes to Michigan, and Shane Beamer like crushes them. Like, I think that would just be awful. Just in terms of roster, like I said, Michigan's ready to win now. So even if you're Brady Hoke, like Brady Hoke won 11 games his first year because Rich Rod had that place ready to rock. They just didn't give him that extra year. Harbaugh left Stanford, and then they immediately go like 12-1. David Shaw had like Andrew Luck for a year.
Yeah.
And that was the year they killed Iowa or whatever. McCaffrey was like a Heisman guy. That was after Harbaugh left. So there's a real chance that that's Michigan next year, no matter who's coaching them, right? Because the players are coming back, seniors pissed off. So Florida State building a lot of guys. I don't know if we've seen a team other than TCU, right? Take it to the next level and get to the playoffs. That's what I want to see. Like, you got to win the conference next year. Otherwise, how many years does Mike Norvell get at just taking transfers?
I think you get as many as long as you keep winning.
But he's 18 and what, 16?
Yeah, but I think some of that's also for as bad as the way things started and the direction that he has him trending. You're an idiot, I think, if you move him. If you're considering moving him out.
I'm just putting it out there. I was just asking a question, man. They won 10 games this year. What do you think they need to see next year? Like, if they go 10-3 again, what do you think of that?
I think a lot of it hinges on Benson staying healthy and Travis staying healthy. If those like core guys stay healthy, anything less than playoffs is a bust.
Well, I'm going to look up their schedule. Did you see Georgia's schedule next year?
Yeah, you might as well just pencil them in.
They made fun of Michigan this year. That Georgia schedule is way worse than Michigan's this year. And if Tennessee falls off after losing Hooker, like, they play nobody, right? At least Michigan has to play Ohio State every year. And Penn State. Like, Michigan had 2 top 10 wins. Georgia next year would have nothing. If Tennessee's not there to boost that schedule up, that's a sham schedule. Florida State has to play LSU again. That's going to be a big game. I could see them losing because LSU seems to be hot. I think LSU and Michigan both have the 5th best odds, I think, for the national championship next year. USC is getting a lot of hype, I think, 4th. And then, of course, the other 3. The 3 that are always there, Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama. So, but that would be a big game because if Florida State really kicked their season off beating them, and that kind of twisted things around. Otherwise, their schedule's not too bad. The ACC dates aren't there, but they still play at Florida. Florida shouldn't be that good, right?
They shouldn't, but you always have to factor in rivalry games.
Are they done with the divisions next year?
I wasn't sure if it was this year or next year.
I don't see NC State on their schedule. I was seeing if there was a game here. I was going to tell you to come down for it. But I don't see it on here now. They play Boston College, Clemson, Miami, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. So they must not have them. I think that makes things tougher too. Because now you're guaranteed to probably play Clemson, twice?
Yeah.
Want to go to that game? We'll make plans, and then it will be Pitt versus Clemson. the ACC championship people will be like, how the hell is Pitt back here? I don't even know what to think of that schedule. We might have to do a breakdown. We should do a comparison of all the ACC schedules now. Because someone's getting screwed, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, who do they have dropped off? Like, they don't play Louisville. They don't play NC State. But they've added Virginia Tech and Pitt.
Well, they added Pitt.
Because they normally play Boston College, Clemson, Syracuse, Wake, right? And their crossover has been Miami.
Yeah.
So the 3 new teams would be Duke, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. And I think they would have played one of them still, right? So instead of having just one, like they're losing Louisville and NC State and adding Virginia Tech and Pitt for real. Like that's probably how this happened. Duke would have probably been their rotation on anyway as the extra team. Is how I'm thinking that went down. Which, I mean, honestly, Virginia Tech and Pitt for Louisville and NC State, I think that's kind of a push. Pitt probably being the best of the 4. I would have them above NC State, right? NC State hasn't won anything. Pitt has at least been ACC champs. That's just like a fair assessment. I don't think anyone can argue that point. Anything else you want to add on it?
No.
All right. Well, we'll be back cheering on Tom Brady next week, hopefully with the big celebration. I've been having a lot of my teams have just been eliminated, Matt. So who knows what we'll talk about on the show? It'll just be we'll do a Jim Harbaugh tracker. Unless he's gone by next week too, then we'll just have 2 more shows and I'll start doing my hype for the XFL. So make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss it, man. And we'll see you next week.